flammable material planted in my head. It's just a big device, just a tooth of death. The solutions are the problems. They put up the wall. On each side, time and primus. When shall we get back home?
Hi, Ken. It's Jake Burns.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How's yourself?
Not too bad, thanks.
Good. Glad to hear it.
When are you heading up to Canada?
Early next week. We've got some rehearsals booked in, and then the first show is, I believe, Wednesday night. Yes, Wednesday night
in Toronto.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Amazingly, we had to add an extra show because the first one in Toronto sold out. So that's a really nice. That's a nice way to start. You know.
Darn right. I noticed that you're doing Toronto, then London, then Toronto again.
Yeah, it was the only way we could fit it. In. Really, it was like, so it led to a mad scramble of everybody going, "But I've already booked my flights. Well, you're going to have to change them all now. But we've booked rehearsals. Well, you're going to have to change them now, aren't you?" Both our crew and our management really love us.
I can imagine, and life could be worse.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we could be, cancelling shows as opposed to putting extra ones in, so that's always a good thing.
So why Canada now?
Well, it came about, it started actually a couple of years ago. We were sitting down with our management and we were sort of looking, the band have reached the stage now where we can pretty much plan out our year in terms of, we tour the UK in March, we do festivals during the summer, we try and do Europe, either, sort of around the late spring, early summertime. And then it's a case of we've gotten to a stage where we tour Australia every second year. We tour America every second year. And to be honest with you, I mean, we were sitting about saying, well, is there anywhere else that, we're kind of missing out that we're not going to? And, I sort of looked across the room and one of our managers is Canadian. And I went, Canada. He's sitting right in front of me. And I said, it tends to get lumped in sort of almost as an afterthought on a North American tour. And most bands play Toronto, Vancouver, maybe Montreal. And so I said to him, there got to be other places to play up there. And he said, absolutely. There's a load of places. I said, well, can we go do them? And so 2 years ago we went up, and I think we played, around 7 or 8 shows. And it was basically a toe in the water, almost an experiment, really, Ken, to tell you the truth, just to see if it was, if it was worth our while to do, and also if there was enough interest, people wanted us to come do it. And, apart from maybe one or two that were, like a wet Sunday night in Saskatoon wasn't exactly great. But, the rest of them, we were surprised by the turnout and by the enthusiasm and also by the knowledge of the crowd, I mean, the people really knew who we were and there seemed to be a genuine affection that, we'd taken the time to come up and play there. And so it was floated again. Obviously, we left it alone for a year, then it was floated again. And this time around, the promoters were keen, I think, because they saw, we'd made some form of commitment first time. And so this time we're doing a lot more. I mean, we're there pretty much for all of November. I don't think I get home till, right at the start of December. So it's a full month. It's a proper tour,
Back in the day, when you were first getting going and you were at the height, I guess, of the punk movement, was Canada one of the places that was big on you guys?
We again, like I said, we only really played Toronto and Vancouver. I mean, I remember our very first show in Canada was at the legendary El Macambo Club in Toronto, and of course, I think we'd released the second album by the time we made it across the Atlantic. But obviously the first album was called Flammable Material, and we're on stage at the El Macambo, and suddenly our manager's waving wildly at me from the side of the stage, and he said, so I sort of, stopped between songs, went across, and went, what do you want? And he said, the club's on fire. I went, I'm sorry? He said, the kitchen's on fire. You're going to have to get everybody out. And the place was packed. It was absolutely rammed. I said, how am I going to get them all out? I said, well, just tell them they got to leave. I went, okay. So I went up to the microphone and said, I'm really sorry to sort of have to break this to you, but apparently the club is on fire. And of course, because, we're standing there with like the sort of flames behind us as a backdrop. The album's called Flammable. They honestly thought I was joking. I mean, they thought sort of, yeah, that's right. You're damn right we're on fire. It's going great. I'm like, oh, okay. Nobody seems to want to leave. I think it was only when the fire guys turned up with like axes and stuff that people started to believe us. But by which stage, luckily, the kitchen staff had managed to put the fire out, so no harm done. We managed to finish the show. But yeah, I mean, it's, back then we were coming across and we were playing sort of, the same size clubs all the way across America. So, we didn't really think of Canada as a separate entity back then. It was part of the American tour, like I said, Right. But yeah, I mean, it was that. And then I remember we played the Commodore in Vancouver. And we got there a couple of days early. We went down, some friends, girls' school, I think, were playing there the night before. They were opening for, I forget who they were opening for. But we got there and it was like, hell, this place is big. And, we were like, we got to play here on our own tomorrow night. And we were convinced it was going to be empty. But in fact, there was a sizable crowd there. So, yeah, I mean, I've always had very, very fond memories of playing in Canada, And in fact, actually, when the last album came out, the last studio album, which is like about 4 years or so ago now, we were actually in Toronto when my wife called me to tell me that it had gone to number 1 on the British rock charts. So, wow. Again, I got apart from the club nearly burning down and bringing a very, very quick end to our career, apart from that, my memories of Canada are all pretty positive.
Well, actually, that is too. I mean, you made it through. Right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. And like I said, it's a story to tell,
Exactly. I want to go way back
to
when you first started, because I was reading an interview where you said Rory Gallagher was one of your biggest guitar influences when you were young.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I was going to say, yeah, he's actually the reason I picked up a guitar in the first place. I would have been about 12 years old, I think, and I was just watching the football results of a Saturday evening. And when that would have been around, about sort of, the football results come through about 5 o'clock on a Saturday evening. This would have been 1970. And, yeah, the football results went through, and I got up and was about to wander out of the room. And suddenly this sound came from the television. And basically, it was the BBC for once had the wisdom to record Taste's farewell show from the Ulster Hall. Taste was Rory's band prior to him going solo. And they started with, well, I'm not sure if they actually started with the song Morning Sun, but that's the track I remember sticking in my mind. And it was just, I heard the guitar sound and sort of froze and turned around and sat back down again. And I remember even at 12 years old watching him and thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to be that guy. It's a couple of years of badgering of my parents later, I finally got a guitar. I think they thought it was just going to be another, you're 12 years old, it's another passing phase. Yeah, sure, we're going to buy you a guitar. Yeah, right. And eventually they did. And again, sort of fast forward quite a few years, we ended up signed to the same record label as Rory, and I actually became quite friendly with him. And to the point that he actually came and played guitar on one of our records for us, and that was a wonderful sort of closing of the circle, really, as far as I was concerned. I mean, it was just a thrill of a lifetime, really. So.
Absolutely, he was something special, wasn't he?
Absolutely, I mean, a phenomenal guitar player. But also, I mean, the great thing, and I find this with a lot of people who were either influences or heroes that I've come to meet over the years. People always say you should never meet your heroes and stuff, but I've been incredibly lucky. The people that influenced me or that I liked and who I got to meet have all turned out to be really, really nice people. Which was. I'm sure eventually I'm going to meet somebody who's going to be an asshole, but I haven't yet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's one thing I've noticed about. Ever since I started the site doing the interviews, everybody who in the rock industry, at least, I don't know anything about the pop industry, but everybody is just a really nice, down-to-earth person. I haven't met any assholes yet either. In all my
right. Well, I did nearly meet Lou Reed once, but I heard nothing but bad things. But I managed to dodge that particular bullet. I didn't run into him. But
yeah, I've heard the same thing about him. Okay, so you're into Rory Gallagher, and your first band was called Highway Star, based on a Deep Purple song. So you're into Purple as well.
Yeah.
How do you go from Rory Gallagher and Deep Purple into punk?
Well, basically, I mean, obviously, like I said, I was 12 years old when I was, first heard Rory and stuff. And I was quite a precocious kid when it came to the sort of music I listened to. That was mainly because, I mean, there was always music played in our house. I mean, nobody played an instrument, but there was always like records being played. And, you know, my dad was a huge Hank Williams fan and stuff. So, you know, that was always on, or the radio was always on. And where I grew up, my friends, the guys I hung out with, were all 2 or 3 years older than I was, and they kind of put up with the snotty little kid hanging about with them. As a consequence of which, they were listening to bands that were probably a bit, you know, beyond my pay grade, really. You know, when I should have been listening to glam rock at 12, I was listening to Rory Gallagher and to Black Sabbath and those sort of people. Right. So, you know, I kind of had gotten all the Guitar Hero worship and stuff kind of out of my system by the time I was 16. You know, it was like I was done with it. You know, I never ever wanted to hear another 10-minute drum solo in my life. And I started to listen more to the actual songs rather than people showing off. I mean, you know, all that stuff's very, very impressive when you're young. And, but, you know, I started to see beyond that a bit, and I started to get more into people like Bob Dylan. And then, you know, then I started listening to, and then around that time, something that's, it's always bugged me that this particular movement in Britain is kind of dismissed with the term pub rock. I mean, it sort of makes it sound like, you know, it didn't have any real ambition to it. And basically it was called that just because the bands played in bars and pubs. But those bands tended to be, there was a lot of Americana about with those bands. And, you know, people like Brinsley Schwartz, Eggs Over Easy, Chili Willy and the Red Hot Peppers. Those guys, they were very sort of Americana influenced. But the band that really caught my ear were a band called Dr. Feelgood. And these guys were all playing, like I said, either Americana stuff or basic R&B, and they tightened it up and they toughened it up, and the songs were done in 3 minutes, and I thought it was the most exciting thing I'd heard in years. And so, you know, that I was attracted to that, and people like Graham Parker as well was also I was a big fan of. So, you know, I'd become more interested in the actual song and the idea that you could get on, be punchy, and be done in 3 minutes. So, of course, it was a short hop from Dr. Feelgood to the Sex Pistols, really, because, I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of difference. The big difference being, of course, that the Pistols and the Damned were my age, and that, you know, that really was. It was like, wow, these guys, obviously, they must like the same sort of stuff I do. They must do, because of the way they're playing. I thought, and also the fact that suddenly my parents hated it again, and I thought, oh, this is good. This is good, because, you know, they haven't really hated anything I've been playing. You know, the days of sort of, you argued because you wanted to grow your hair long and play Black Sabbath records, and it was all turn that rotten noise down. Those had kind of, you know, dissipated, because Bob Dylan they kind of took. You know, Bruce Springsteen was okay. That sounded a bit like, you know, rock and roll records they listened to. But then they sort of saw the Sex Pistols on TV, and they heard this sort of snarling stuff coming from my bedroom, and they hated it again. I went, oh no, I'm definitely on the right track again here. This is definitely right. And so, it really wasn't that short of leap. The big difference, or the big thing I found that kind of stopped me from buying into it completely straight away was I just thought it was designed to be a short-lived thing, which, you know, in the case of some of the bands, it really was. You know, it was designed to be a short, sharp shock, and then, you know, it was done. And so, you know, as much as I was impressed by it and thought it was great. And in fact, it made me think that it was probably what it must have been like to sort of come across Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard when they were first starting. It had that sort of vibe to it, you know, that sort of this was proper rock and roll. It's all, you know, it's up there. It's all more about attitude and get it done in 3 minutes. But like I said, I didn't see a long-term, you know, future to it until I heard The Clash. And once I heard The Clash, then it was like, hang on a minute, these guys are actually writing songs about stuff, and they're writing about their lives. And you know, for all the people, particularly the early Clash, before I heard White Man and Hammersmith Polly, which I still think is the greatest thing they ever did, but before I heard that, you know, White Riot was kind of the flagship song, but the one that impressed me the most was Career Opportunities, because there they were writing about, you know, the actual, I mean, right from the ironic title, you know, they were writing about the fact that there was nothing but a lack of and a dearth of job opportunities for young working class kids in England at the time, and they wrote it in a way that you could understand, assuming you could understand Joe's diction, the way you could understand, and they wrote it in, you know, basically in everyday language, and that all impressed the hell out of me. And that was basically when I thought, I can write songs like that, and that was the springboard, you know.
Right, and you mentioned that it was supposed to be a short-lived thing. I mean, the Sex Pistols did one album, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so, how surprised are you that now, 40 years later, you're still touring around the world?
Astonished. I mean, I don't think there are words to describe it. I've talked to guys who are in bands of similar, if not slightly older vintage. I mean, we're friends obviously with the guys in the Damned and the Buzzcocks and the Stranglers and those guys. And I don't think any of us envisaged this as a career at all. It was something that was fun to do. It was something that was exciting to do. And, I remember when we made the first album, the Inflammatory record, it was like, no record label was willing to take a chance on us. Rough Trade was basically still a record store. And they said to us, look, we've never made an album. You've never made an album. Why don't we try and do one together? So we did. But I remember even when I was recording it thinking, well, this is probably the only time we're going to get to do this. And, if nothing else, it's something to play to the grandkids and say, this is what your granddad did when he was young and daft. As it turned out, like you said, 41 years later, I'm still doing it, and I don't have any grandkids. So there you go.
It really is amazing, isn't it, that it's lasted this long?
Yeah. Well, I think it is
in a negative way.
No, I understand. I mean, I know you're not being derogatory, and I mean, no, because I'm as amused as you are. I mean, but I think that if you stand aside from it and just look at it, as much of a disinterested outsider as it's possible for me to be, I think that it comes down to the fact that all those bands, I think they surprised themselves as well as the critics, but they all could really write songs. I mean, songs that stand the test of time, that still get played today. They get used, get used in advertising today, for Pete's sake,
Right.
You never would have saw that coming,
Right.
And also I know that everybody says every musician writes the soundtrack to somebody's life, and I mean, they happen to pick up on, at a time they picked up on how young people felt, certainly in Britain and at the time, and and that means so much to people. And we always tried to write songs about things that meant something. I mean, in my case, it certainly was, I was trying to write songs about things that offended my sense of justice or fair play, and never. I always tried. I mean, I failed a lot of times, but I've tried to not take sides. I've almost tried to approach these things in a journalistic fashion and just say, look, this is what's happening. I mean, how do you feel about that? Because I don't have the answers to the things that we sing about. If I did, I would have tried to be a politician instead of a musician. But I think because of that, and the things we write about, and again, another thing, just again, I'm saying this is a rambling answer, but another thing, is that we never got to the point where we made like U2 money. We never got to the point where we were divorced from the same problems that our audience face. So if I'm writing about something that's affected me, the chances are it's affected a lot of people in our audience as well. And I think that is, another reason that people stick by the band is because, they can relate to it.
I got to admit, I'm kind of new to punk. I mean, I grew up on, the same stuff that you did early on.
Right.
I grew up on, Van Halen and
sure,
Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, stuff like that. Punk was always a little behind. I mean, I liked it, but I've never been to a punk show in my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the closest you'd get is probably Joan Jett, but
right. Okay.
I mean, and she was pretty punky, but I saw her, 2 months ago.
Right.
So it wasn't really a punk show. Tell all the Canadians who are listening to this, what can we expect when we see a Stiff Little Fingers concert in November?
Well, basically, I mean, again, what we try to do is to cover as much of the band's career as we can when we're on stage. But, you're trying to cram 40 years into an hour and a half. So, by necessity, there's a lot of stuff that's left out. We're well aware that, this is probably people's first time of seeing the band. So, somebody that thinks, well, I only really liked the first album, so I bet they're just playing the new album or whatever, so I'm not going to bother going. That's not the case. I mean, we do try and reflect as much on the entire career as possible. Hopefully not to the detriment of newer material. We try, like I said, we do try and cover everything. But there are a certain number of, we can't drop that song or they'll kill us about some of the songs in the set. I think that's the same for every band. So it's not. We're not a punk rock band in the sort of hair, leather jackets, requisite number of studs on the back type of band. We're like I said, we're mainly all about the songs and about what the band has stood for all these years. And like I said, that tends to be writing songs that mean something to us and hopefully mean something to the audience as well. But I mean, the other thing is, again, we always get classified as a sort of political band, and that makes us sound terribly dour-faced and sort of miserable. And there's a huge amount of humour about the band. I mean, we don't take ourselves terribly seriously. We take the songs seriously, we take the performance seriously, but as people, and we do realise that at the end of the day, what we all do as grown men for a living is faintly ridiculous. But it's still it's what we do, and we strive to do it to the best of our ability. And
you're living the dream, man. I mean, how many people want to be up on a stage every night making?
Well, absolutely. Until you do it for 40 odd years, it's like, living the dream wears a bit thin whenever your tour bus breaks down and it's snowing outside. That's
good point. Good point. Now, speaking of new music, new album at some point soon.
Yeah, well, maybe not soon. I mean, we did the last album. Like I said, it's been 4 years since that, and I mean, in that interim, I had to move house again. So I'm still bizarrely 4 years later. I'm still surrounded by packing cases. But yeah, we have started writing. We will be playing at least one brand new song on the trip. The plan, I believe, is to, by this time next year, be in a position where we're ready to go into a studio and hopefully record at the back end of next year and release an album very early. So in the spring of 2020, I think that's what we're looking at.
Awesome. And I guess as a political a band that covers a lot of political content, you got a lot of stuff to talk about these days.
Yeah, my friends keep saying that to me. I mean, I go out for a beer and so some other craziness that comes on the television, and they're like, "Man, you really can't be short of things to write about." And to be honest with you, Ken, it's a bit. I often feel, I mean, while that's true, it's also a bit like sort of being confronted with the biggest all-you-can-eat buffet. You don't really know where to start.
It's like
I don't want to cram it all into one song because I'll just make myself sick. So it's a case of picking your targets.
Well, I'm going to be at the Ottawa show. Super excited about this. You're with the Mahones.
Yes, great band, and also really good friends of ours. We've done a couple of tours with them in the past. We were all on a package thing with the Dropkick Murphys and a couple of other people. And that's actually where we first met them. So that's going back quite a few years. And I mean, anytime they come through town, Finney and I always end up having a couple of Guinnesses together. So it's nice to be touring with some friends. In fact, when we announced the tour, literally my phone rang. I think about 5 minutes after we put the tour poster up on social media. My phone rang and it was Finney saying, and he was in Europe going, "We've got to do this tour with you." I went, "Okay."
Why not?
That was kind of how that happened.
That's fantastic. So it should be a really good night of rock and roll.
I sincerely hope so. Like I said, I mean, both ourselves and the Mahones both pride ourselves on sort of playing well. So yeah, I mean, it should be a lot of fun.
Nice. And I have a couple real quick questions because I am a guitar player.
Okay.
What do you play?
On stage, I play ESP guitars. They're the E2 ST2 model, and I've used ESPs for how long now? Christ, a long time. I honestly can't remember when I got my first one. I mean, I used to use Yamahas, but found I was having tuning problems with them. But the ESP, because it's the first guitar I used that had the locking system. So, back then I used to batter the living hell out of them. I've learned to actually play a bit better since then. So they tend to, hopefully of course I'm saying this now, they stay in tune. Of course, now I've said that, I'm going to have problems in Ottawa, aren't I? And I've said that, but generally they do. And I mean, I love the sound. To be honest with you, these days, it's a bit like you'd be unlucky to buy a bad car. You'd be unlucky to buy a bad guitar, really, these days. They're all made to such high specification,
Well, yeah, and ESP's a great name.
Yeah, they are. So those are the electric guitars I take out with me. At home, I also use my favourite acoustic is a Loudon, which is a Northern Irish guitar company. That's just that's a gorgeous instrument. I've been doing more and more sort of acoustic stuff just as a sideline to the band. In fact, actually, again, since we just mentioned the Dropkick Murphys, I'd literally just finished a tour on my own, opening for those guys on Flog and Molly around the US, and that was a lot of fun. It's a totally different dynamic walking on stage on your own, and particularly some nights the entire audience had already gotten in. So, there's like one little stool out on the stage in front of like 7,000 or 8,000 people, and I've got to walk out and sit on it. It's a bit nerve-wracking. I'm kind of used to having 3 other guys with a battery of amplifiers behind me. Okay, I'm on my own now.
Oh man, that's a tough gig.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. Luckily, the audience were kind. That's the best I can say.
That's awesome. And I have one more question for you. And
absolutely.
Your band is called Stiff Little Fingers. As you get older, do you have problems with your stiff fingers? I mean, I'm having problems playing guitar now because my fingers don't work the way they should.
Yeah, one or two. And in fact, actually, bizarrely, it was just this afternoon I actually noticed that I was just, because I tend to play every day. And yeah, just this afternoon I did notice that I was having a problem reaching a fret that I normally wouldn't have thought twice about, So, yeah, I'm afraid, I guess it comes to all of us. I mean, but then, have you seen photographs of the state of Keith Richards' hands these days? I don't know how that man even plays guitar.
Well,
I mean... and yet he still sounds great, So
I know, right? And he's going to outlive us all, that's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got to take care of the planet because we're leaving it to him. Yeah,
him and the cockroaches.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, this has been very cool. I'm really happy that we got in touch, and I'm really looking forward to the show on.
Cool. Thank you very much.
And November 16th.
There you go.
Yeah.
And thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
And thank you, and best of luck with the start of the tour. And I hope you dress warm. It's getting cold up here.
Yeah, I was afraid of that. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I live in Chicago, so I'm used to it. Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks very much for your time, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.